From the Retool Studios in Boulder, Colorado, I'm George Thomas. We have Dave Christen with us today, and I promise I will not be in shorts a whole lot longer. I will start wearing pants. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it.
Director of the Boulder Ironman.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you actually ended up in the position you are with Ironman.
Sure, great question. George and I were joking a little bit about it beforehand and saying that I kind of drew a short straw. I think anybody that's in the event production business feels like it's a big undertaking to put these events on. But I'm honored to be at the helm of this new event of the Ironman Boulder. Bringing an Ironman to this town has been an absolute exciting project, something that I've been just proud to be a part of in general. There's been a lot of people involved, not just me. But came to Ironman a few years ago just working as a general course guy, to be honest with you. Cone slinger, goo packet, picker-upper. That was my gig. And just slowly, a lot of our staff within Ironman kind of just start doing whatever the job requires.
I got to interrupt you a second because I think it's important that the goo packet picker-upper actually gets some attention because, well, without that person,
Yep.
You're not wanted by a community.
Yeah, this will serve as a public service announcement that you shouldn't litter outside of an aid station. Please drop your trash inside the aid stations because there is somebody that has to go out there and pick those up. But yeah, it's important. We take our relationships with every community seriously, and that means picking up after you leave. So it's definitely something that everybody plays a part in when you're putting on a race.
Now, is your background in triathlon? Did you race triathlon as you were coming up into it, or
no, just not really at all. Collegiate athlete, somewhat. More of a role player on any teams that I was on in college. Not any type of amazing athlete. Did some track stuff, and then eventually started doing ultra distance trail races as a hobby, and then put on a race. I ran my own trail half marathon for a little while out in Virginia. Then came out to Colorado to work for the Olympics, and then after that got to know the Ironman crew. So it's kind of the quick and dirty progression.
And kind of run us through actually the job of being the event director, because people see you on race day and I think don't really appreciate what all goes into what you have to do.
Yeah, I think George has done a great job of getting some great event producers. We've spoken with Lance on this program before, and every race director has to kind of put pieces in play for their team to then take on race day and use. So I think the great event producers out there have a really strong team around them, and if they can build that team, then putting on a race is fairly easy. It's when you don't have a good solid group in place. So really a race director's job is to make sure equipment, supplies, people, service providers are in place for race day for their team to then take those tools and then implement. So whether it be my bike course guys making sure they have the equipment necessary, whether it's cones, signage, to forklifts for our site teams, to lots of different things, to porta potties, to ice, to everything. So I always put on our Facebook page that's my job. I'm a porta potty ice guy. So that's
Goo picker upper.
Yeah, and a goo picker upper. So thank you, Goo, for giving that product placement. So
now, the events that you've directed, have they been events that you actually own, where you've had really full reign to put these on?
Yeah, I used to own my own half marathon where it was literally just do whatever I wanted. I got my permits, and basically from that point on, it was just me, and I got to determine how the race was run. Once I came to work for the Olympics, and then again for Ironman, a lot of those changes, obviously there's parameters that they set, but as a race director, you really do have a lot of creative license to do specific things, whether it's the way you start your athletes in a race. We've talked a lot about in our company how the swim start specifically takes place, to your post-race food and things like that. The things you can add your own creativity, whether it's bands and t-shirt sizes or colors and things like that. There's a lot of creative license. There are parameters, but for the most part, they kind of let you go.
So Ironman actually is giving you a lot of freedom with the event to put your stamp on it.
Yeah, there's a lot. Obviously, our brand is very precious. So there's a lot of things that we do with our brand that are important. The second thing to that is our safety standards are very standard. Our protocol across the country is really, really high. And we hold ourselves at a safety standard above any other event production company in the world. And that's something we pride ourselves on, whether that be safety on the water, safety on the bike, or on the run, or wherever. Those are parameters that we have to abide by. But there's other things that we have that freedom to kind of just develop as we go. Courses.
Ironman does want people to know that when they sign up for an event, they are meeting a certain standard.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the biggest things that we try to. The message that we try to send is when you race with us, there's a level of expectations we have for ourselves and the athletes should have with us. We know it's not. Let's be honest, it's not cheap to race with us, but at the same time, there's certain things that you get when you race with us that you would never see in another event production team anywhere in the world.
let's get into your swim start.
Yep.
I know that caused some controversy.
Absolutely.
And I just want to address that right off the bat. Is that the start you're going to be doing for the Ironman?
Yeah, that's for the plan for Ironman Boulder right now is to do a rolling start, just like we've kind of started implementing this year at some of our events around the country. Athletes will seed themselves based on their swim ability, how fast they're going to swim the 1.2 or 2.4 miles, and we try to get fast out front and slow out back. More experienced athletes out front and non-experienced athletes out back, and to put it in another way. The goal really is to reduce stress. There's stress at every spectrum of the swim start, whether it be professionals to high-end age groupers to first-timers. And a lot of that we feel like by putting people of like ability or similar ability with each other, that it will kind of calm those athletes down a little bit, especially the first-timers. We think that those are the ones we have to watch closest in the water, and by doing that, this swim start, it'll essentially calm those athletes down. They're not going to get swam over. They're going to have plenty of time to take the first 100 meters and swim. So that's kind of our goal. So Boulder will be a rolling swim start at this point until we come to a different conclusion.
What's the reaction from a lot of the pro triathletes toward that? Because my feeling is when you're racing, you go as hard as you can throughout the race, and you've given it all you've got when you get to the finish line, and it really doesn't matter what happens where you're seated, because if you've done all you can. But it does matter.
Yep.
You know, there's a reason the leader of the Tour de France goes off last in a time trial, because you want to know where people are. So does necessarily the fastest person want to be the first person in the swim?
Yeah, that's a great question, George. The pro triathletes in general will still have their traditional single launch, and we should make that clarification. The rolling start's more for our age group athletes. In Boulder this weekend we have our Boulder Peak, and it's the pro athletes will have a beach start. It'll be a single line, and the athletes will launch. That's going to be very traditional, very similar in all of our races, even now with this new rolling start. So the pro athletes will know where their competitors are at exactly. It's going to be very clean for them. There are some instances where it will still be a time trial / rolling start type feel, and that's, again, we're making that decision based on safety, and that's a hard change for our sport. It is emotionally charged, we know, but at the same time we have to make conscious decisions to preserve human life at every opportunity we have, and that's what this is driving this decision is. In a mass start, our response times to somebody in the middle of the scrum is impacted at a huge scale when you've got 3,000 athletes launching at the same time, and it might not help you to have a lifeguard be able to get to you in 30 seconds, but it's going to help somebody by making this change. So it might be that you're strong enough and it doesn't matter how many people you're swimming with.
I would think 3,000 swimmers in Boulder Reservoir would displace a lot of water.
It certainly would. Yeah, it certainly would. But I think the summary of what the message that we want to send is that, one, we're prioritizing safety over everything, as anybody should in our business and even as athletes. But secondly, that we're learning. It's not something that we feel will be as is 10 years from now as what you're seeing today. It's going to be something that will evolve. And we need your feedback, and we need athletes to give us that type of feedback to say, okay, let's try a slight iteration of that. We're very open to those comments. We just need to hear them. So chime in.
One of the first things I've heard about the Ironman coming to Boulder was, it's about time.
Yeah.
What took it so long to come to this area? I mean, Boulder has been a huge part of triathlon training for years.
Sure. Yeah, it certainly has been, and to full disclosure, there was a full distance Ironman or triathlon here before this. A gal by the name of Beth put on a race back when it was basically a similar course in some respects, but most of it was held at the Boulder Reservoir, and there was a handful of athletes that participated in it. So to make sure credit is given where it's due, it's been done before in Boulder, but at a much smaller scale. I think what took so long is I think Boulder, putting on an event in Boulder historically has been something that's been hard to do. But I think that's kind of been a misnomer, to be honest with you. I think the city, when we first approached them about bringing Ironman to Boulder, they were incredibly excited about it. And it's been totally different than what people probably would have thought about Boulder. The city manager, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the city council have been absolutely fantastic and excited about it. I think it just
Which
came down
is
to
exactly the opposite of what you hear.
Exactly.
Is that Boulder is very difficult to work with.
Yeah, I think it's honestly, I just think it's a misunderstanding. I think at the end of the day, the city is very open to ideas. There's parameters. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to live in a set of rules, safety-wise, permitting-wise, and things like that, and it takes time. And our reputation is very strong, and I think us coming to Boulder at this time, our reputation helped push that through. We do this 10 times in North America and countless times around the world each year. Our experience level is unmatched when it comes to putting on a triathlon. So.
And what does Ironman bring to the community?
That's a great question, George. A lot more than triathlon. I think Ironman brings a lifestyle, an excitement to a town that is unique. If you go to any of our events around the country, you would see this. There's an energy that builds that month leading up to an event, and it's triathletes to non-athletes at all alike come out and they see that excitement at a really high level. So I think that's probably one of the biggest factors, is just the energy of people doing something crazy for 17 hours. And people latch on to that, it's just that this is insane, and they see that and they want to come out, and whether it's volunteer or just, blow an air horn or something like that for 15 minutes, they just want to be a part of it. And I think that obviously having our sport be such a traveling sport, meaning a lot of people turn our races into vacations for their family. They all travel together. There's economic impact that travels with that, and we've documented that very well. And when we talk to a city like Boulder, we have very strong data to show 75% of our athletes are going to come from outside of the state of Colorado. That's a big deal.
75%.
Yeah, 75% is our national average. There's some that have even higher percentages, like a Coeur d'Alene, for example, obviously Idaho doesn't have all that many athletes. So there's some that have some really unique statistics, but 75% is kind of our, if you take all the averages, it's kind of that middle, median amount of traveling athletes in the races. So
I'm curious, Ironman, I'm sure they protect their brand, but they also, I would assume, want to protect their other events. So when you mentioned Coeur d'Alene, that just made me think, do the organizers of Coeur d'Alene, are they going to feel like the Boulder Triathlon is taking some of our athletes away?
No, that's a great question. Mac, the race director in Coeur d'Alene, and I are great friends. We work together on a daily basis. Literally, we call each other probably once a week to just either make fun of each other or whatever. We watch our capacity levels at all of our races, how quickly things sell out. With Arizona selling out this year in 40 seconds,
I was going to say, I thought that was immediate.
Clearly there's demand that is all over the place. So we watch the percentage where athletes travel from. With having as many events that we have in the country, we can watch where athletes are coming from and where they're traveling to. The great thing about our races and our race series is you can race one race in Louisville one year, and then you can go check out another part of the country in another year. So it's really interesting to watch athletes. They don't necessarily do the same race over and over every year, so they really spread out, if that makes any sense. And it's we don't think Coeur d'Alene will see much of an impact. Madison, same thing. Texas, same thing. We think that those events will be as successful as they've always been. Arizona's one of the fastest races in the world, so that will continue to be popular because people want to PR there. Same thing in Florida. That's why those two sell out so quickly. Yeah.
You were talking about spectators being out for 17 hours, or at least the athletes out for 17 hours.
Yeah.
How spectator friendly is this course going to be? And at the same time, I think something Ironman's done that is just excellent is tracking of the athletes, where if I want to follow you, all I have to do is put your name in and I can see exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, it's we're going to do some unique things in Boulder specifically because we think there's going to be a lot of interest, especially as technology evolves. We believe that we can empower spectators with information that will help them get to places where they can see their athletes. With a single loop swim and a single loop bike course, which is our projected courses at this point, spectating for those two legs is fairly minimal, to be frankly honest. If it's a multi-loop, 3-loop course like we have in Arizona, for the bike course, you see your athlete 3 times pedaling their bike. What we do in a lot of other places, we do these really unique shuttles, and we kind of turn a shuttle point into a party. So in St. George, before that was 70.3, we used to have a party out in a little town called Ivans that we would basically, it was a big fitness festival, and the town would have this, and we'd shuttle all the spectators out there, and they would see their athletes pass through this festival. There was a concert and food and things like that. And we hope to do the same thing up at Carter Lake for the Boulder Ironman, which would be really unique. So athletes would get out of the water, and then their family would all jump on our buses, and we'd take them up to Carter Lake and just throw a big bash, maybe at the biker bar that's up there or something like that, and have a great time. So
Now you're talking about Carter Lake. Can you really go in
Sure.
and spend some time on each of the courses, so the swim, the bike, and the run?
yeah, it is a split transition or a double transition for this race. So the athletes will swim at the Boulder Reservoir. Right now the plan is a 2.4-mile single loop swim. It will be different than if you've ever raced our races in Boulder, at the Boulder Reservoir before. We swim the same pattern each time. We're actually heading kind of a northern trajectory off the start, which will help the sun issue. We've had a kind of a glaring sun issue into our swimmers' eyes for years. So it'll be a single loop 2.4-mile swim. The athletes will leave there on their bikes. They'll head up to Highway 36 up to 66 in Carter Lake, which is the majority of the climbing is actually in the first about 50 to 60 miles. Total climb for the course as a whole is 3,200 feet. From there they'll head east out to Colorado Boulevard, out to the beautiful plains and fields of the Front Range, head all the way down to about the Erie area, and then take Mineral Road, which is kind of a nice rolling shot right back into town to the Boulder High School, which is where the second transition will be, and their run will start. 2-loop run course, almost entirely, probably about 99.6% of it will be on the Boulder Creek Trail, so 0 vehicular impact for the city, which is great. The narrowest that the trail gets is about 12 feet, 10 to 12 feet, and we use 10 to 12 foot wide path for double loop courses all over the country, and it doesn't pack up all that much. At the end of the day, there's a lot of athletes out there, but people can move plenty. We're not worried about congestion out there. And they'll finish. One of the exciting things about our finish lines is we try to put it right in the middle of town, and we're going to be finishing on Pearl Street, so the famous Pearl Street Mall. So we're excited about that.
I would think one of the best ways to spectate would be to volunteer.
Absolutely.
How
Yeah,
do people get in touch with you about
Yeah.
wanting to pick up goop packets?
Thank you for that plug. It's
All
hard
the
to
time.
Yeah.
Goo, 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 goo.
We recruit volunteers from the get-go. As soon as we started announcing a lot of people want to plug in. Volunteers is a great way to get close. I think as a volunteer, you get to access certain portions of our race that you might not normally access if you were just in the city walking around. If you just go to our website, ironman.com/Boulder, there's a volunteer link. You can reach out to our volunteer director, who's my wife. She does a great job. And she'll plug you into, whether it be if you're interested in being a captain in charge of something specifically like an aid station, or you just want to plug in for 4 hours and plug out, that's fine too. But to give you an idea, we typically have a 2-to-1 ratio of volunteers to athletes. So we'll probably have somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 volunteers at Ironman Boulder, which is cool. We do a lot more. Honestly, sometimes we take more effort and time managing our volunteers than we do our athletes, because it requires that many volunteers to get this thing done.
So you're actually going to have more volunteers than athletes.
Almost always. Yeah.
How many aid stations do you have out there, and how do you coordinate that with the bike course and the run? And
Great question. We'll have, I'm working on a couple other aid station locations. I try to have more than needed. It's nice to have more aid stations than you're expecting, but we'll probably have about eight aid stations, give or take, on our bike course. We'll have a captain that's in charge of that aid station, and they recruit anywhere from 150 to 200 volunteers that come, and they work the aid station for shifts usually, so it's a long day. And they'll spread that out, and they'll have a shift show up and do that. On the run course, we'll have, I think it's 7 aid stations on the run course right now. Same thing, we have somebody in charge of that, and they quarterback it. Often it's like one of the cool stories that we have out of our company is our Ironman Foundation. And the way that we have 5,000 volunteers show up is we go to some of the local nonprofit communities in the area, and we partner with them, and that whoever's in charge of that nonprofit will recruit everybody in their company to come out and work an event, and we then make a donation to their company. So a lot of the high schools, a lot of nonprofits, and things like that will plug into our events, because it's a great way to fundraise for them and get some money back into the community. To give you any idea, we typically put into a community and the nonprofit side for an event about $50,000 for every event in the country, which is great. It's a great story. One of the stories that a lot of athletes don't actually hear, but our foundation does a lot of great work in the communities that we're in. We think it's necessary. If you're not giving back to those communities, you're really missing out on that relationship that you can build with the community. So.
And speaking of fundraising, do a lot of the athletes now come out with a specific charity that they want to race for?
Yeah, we actually have a program through our foundation that you can race for your charity, which is great. And if you go to our website, to the foundation's website, you just Google Ironman Foundation. There's some great ways, some really cool stories that are coming out of the foundation of people just doing some really cool stuff. I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy by the name of Fireman Rob, who's been raising money.
Actually have.
He runs the marathons of our Ironmans in full fire gear, with the oxygen tank and everything. And it's his story is an example of how many people
Spare oxygen is illegal.
It's an empty tank. He's confirmed that it doesn't contain
I would
oxygen.
think the rubber boots and jacket would kind of outweigh that.
Yeah, he's a crazy story, but there's a lot of athletes that take a specific cause, something that they're passionate about, and they race for it. And that's a cool thing. You're seeing that grow, that interest level in that type of racing. It's been great.
I'm curious about the date. First of all, I'll let you tell us when it is.
Sure. August 3rd, 2014.
How does that work into the existing Ironman schedule? Is that something they really had to analyze? And August out here is pretty warm.
Yeah, it is, and we put a lot of thought into the time frames that we do, where the location, obviously first and foremost, so where in the country or where in the world, and then the date is the second conversation always. And we put a lot of thought into August. It is hot in Boulder. With our run course being entirely, just a little known fact, it's about 10 degrees cooler at the Boulder Creek Trail than it is up at the Boulder Reservoir on average throughout the whole year, which is a huge drastic change.
10 degrees.
10 degrees is a lot. So it might be 98 up at the Boulder Reservoir. It could be in the high 80s down in downtown Boulder on the Creek Trail. So there are some things about our race that we built our course based on some of those considerations with the heat. We're not going to run up at the Boulder Reservoir for 26 miles. It would kill people, literally. And it's definitely something that we put a lot of thought into. August was appealing to us because if you look at the whole national calendar, there is a gap right in that weekend. People interest levels are 70.3 here in town. Historically has always been on that date, and it's the second fastest selling out, 70.3 in the world or in the country. And that told us something. People are looking for a race in that early August time frame, and that's kind of how we landed on that date. But we've put a lot of thought in. We know it's hot. But luckily it's a dry heat. It's not a Louisville is a very hot race as well, but the humidity there just zaps people. So it'll be warm, but it's a different type of warm. It's important to distinguish.
Now Boulder was really accepting and enthusiastic about this. What about the outlying communities?
Yeah, there's we've with our history in Boulder already with some of our other races, we actually have three. Some people may not know we have the Boulder Tri-Series that's here. We have 3 other races. Our community relationships stem outside of Boulder City, goes into Boulder County. We have strong relationships up in Larimer County, which is the majority of our bike course, and those communities are excited about it. So Larimer County is home to Fort Collins, and that group sees a lot of cyclists as well, so they're very excited about it as well. Their impact will be different than ours, obviously, because the race will be based out of Boulder, but their community's been great as well. Weld County is basically farmland, so
Weld County's great.
Yeah, they've got
Come on out.
Yeah, exactly. They've got great properties out there and some really exciting pieces of land, and they've been great. They're just they're like, yeah, just come on over and have a great time. So,
What's been your biggest concern putting this together?
I think our biggest concern putting an Ironman on in Boulder specifically was making sure it's an athlete's race. I think to put a race on in Boulder, it has to be very special. It can't be done very casually, if that makes any sense. I think we put a lot of thought into course selection and timing and things like that. And I think that it speaks to how important Boulder is to both the triathlon and cycling communities, endurance sports in general. It doesn't have to be even the running community that's here. If you don't do it right in Boulder, you're gonna know real quick. The athletes are gonna let you know because they live next to you. I think that was one of the driving things for me to really worry about, is to make sure I put a lot of thought, consult with a lot of athletes that are local, say, okay, what if we went up through Carter Lake? Is that crazy? Am I smoking something? Those were scary decisions, to go to make those calls. A lot of people wanted us to go up into the mountains. I'll tell you right now, anybody that's watching this show, I would love to go up into the mountains as a cyclist myself. Let me know if you can get a permit for Peak to Peak Highway. A lot of people don't understand that, and I just want to make that very clear. Yes, I would love to go out into the mountains as much as you would, but you can't shut down Estes Park. It's not possible. So I appreciate the sentiment, but thank you for letting me use your show for a second to calm that down on the social media. But that was my biggest concern, is making sure it's a good race. If it's not a good race for Boulder, for crying out loud, we got to do it right here. 1
minute to sell this race to anyone who's listening. What are the major reasons somebody should come to the Boulder Ironman?
That's a great question. I think the quantity of professional triathletes, world champion triathletes that live here should tell you something. Boulder is special. We have not just our culture, not our environment, our lifestyle. There's something unique about Boulder that is very special, and if you don't get a chance to experience that, you're kind of missing out. And I think that's probably our biggest selling point. Come to Boulder and visit. Come out to the 70.3 and do a training camp before you do the full in August. And Boulder is just so special, and I think that would be the pitch that I would give, is that the downtown scene is just great. The food scene, if you're into microbreweries, things like that, it's just a great place to come and visit. And then obviously the Ironman Boulder is just going to be epic. It's going to be epic.
Boulder Ironman, also known as BIM by Tim O'Donnell.
Yep. Right.
Dave Christen, really appreciate you joining us here at the Retool Studios in Boulder, Colorado.
Sure. Thanks for having me.